Now the co-leader of the Social Democrats, Deputy Catherine Murphy, please.
Thank you. And I also would want to be associated with the remarks in relation to the Gardaí and send our well wishes for a speedy recovery and solidarity to both the Guards and the community who have been traumatised by this. Taoiseach, whenever your housing policy comes under attack, you consistently tell us that the state, and not the cuckoo funds, is the biggest player in the housing market. Well, let's examine this. You've called your housing budget the biggest in the history of the state, and at €3.3 billion it is. But is our money being well spent? Fine Gael's Rebuilding Ireland programme had a construction target of 8,900 social homes for 2021. Under your revised plan, the target has increased to 9,500. Given you have upped the housing budget by 500 million, an additional 593 housing units doesn't seem like much bang for the buck. Despite the fact that construction target has increased by 593 houses, you claim that an additional 28,500 households will secure social housing this year, compared to Rebuilding Ireland's target of 22,157. Well, if construction has increased by just 593 units, how is it that social housing provision is increasing by 6,343? Taoiseach, the answer is the private rental sector, through an increase of 5,800 HAP and RAS tenancies, mostly HAP. Your plan is to provide social housing is utterly reliant on the private market. Long-term leasing deals entered into with vulture and cuckoo funds are rapidly increasing, but we've no way of knowing how many of these are currently being negotiated. Replies to parliamentary questions can't be relied on, which is pretty shocking. The only reliable information we get is when individual local authorities speak to journalists and divulge figures. Deputy Chief Executive of Dublin City Council, Brendan Kenny, has said that they're negotiating for 1,700 long-term leases. Taoiseach, you said that long-term leasing deals entered into with cuckoo funds are bad value for money. So the prospect of local authorities being locked into so many for up to 30 years must fill you with dread. Taoiseach, when you say that the state is one of the biggest players in the housing market, let's be clear about what you mean. In case there's any confusion, I want to clarify. The state is prolific in the private rental market, and obviously that's through those supports I'm talking about, but it's also snapping up homes and long leases. The state is also, via the Strategic Investment Fund, pumping hundreds of millions into large developments that are exclusively bought by cuckoo funds. And obviously that Strategic Investment Fund is what's left of the pension fund. And the state is also determined to sell off vast tracts of lands at rock-bottom prices. So the state's a big player, but on the wrong side. Taoiseach, what's wrong with doing what we have always done, and that is directly building? What's wrong with using the O'Coulon model at scale?
Please. Thank you very much. Taoiseach.
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising the issue of housing, which is the key social issue of our time and of our generation. And again, first of all, there's nothing wrong with the direct build model, and I want to see more direct build. And I'm supporting more direct build, and we're saying government wants to develop that. But the housing assistance program, the HAP scheme, as you have said, that's been in place since 2014. Now, I don't think the Deputy is suggesting that we just switch off that scheme right now, because that would mean thousands and thousands of people who are dependent, who don't have the incomes to buy houses or to secure houses, would be deprived of accommodation. So that's not a practical suggestion that we just immediately wean people off that. It has to be a phased rebalancing of focus in terms of direct building, increasing the housing stock of local authorities and of approved social housing bodies, so that you reduce the dependency on HAP over time and you reduce the dependency on leasing initiatives. I do think long-term leasing is bad value. I think any PPPs or any partnerships should involve the stock coming back to the state after such a time frame. That's my view, and I've made that very clear, and I continue to make that clear. But let's be honest also that the bulk of the focus over the next number of years will be on build in the social housing context. But more than that, in terms of the allocations and the provisions. For example, 690 million is going for affordability measures. And that will be, again, the cost rental scheme, the shared equity scheme, the Help to Buy, Rebuilding Ireland. And yes, that's to enable people to afford to buy houses in the private sector. But that's very important, that people are given opportunities and supports by government to be able to buy housing at affordable levels. And the expansion of Part 5 of the Planning Act, for example, to designate a range of homes for first-time buyers and also for social within any scheme is an important aspect of that. The 400 units and the cost rental, 25% below market values, that's a good initiative. We have brought 2,500 social homes since we came into office back into use. These are local authority houses that were lying idle. We gave specific funding to get them back into use, and this year funding has been provided to local authorities to remediate approximately 3,000 units. So there's a real urgency being applied to this issue. And I don't want to see vacant local authority houses out there. And that's, in my view, something we can do quickly and in a focused way. The Land Development Agency bill will provide social and affordable housing on their lands, and we need that legislation through to enable the agency to get going. And also, you know, that there has been progress made in relation to family homelessness. Overall, we want to directly build 50,000 new homes over the next 5 years. The real capacity issue for us as a country is delivery. We're simply not building enough housing units year by year right now. COVID-19 hit us last year, and it has hit us this year in terms of outputs, but we simply have to get supply up.
Time is up.
Everybody,
thank you very much.
Every level, local authority level, national level, need to really put the focus on delivery and getting projects.
Thank you very much. Deputy Murphy.
Taoiseach, I'm on the record in 2014 when HAP was introduced as saying that unless it was accompanied by substantial building, what would happen would be that we would be paying in perpetuity rents to the private sector. And essentially that is what we're seeing, because the scale of what is being built is being outstripped by the amount that has been spent by rents. Taoiseach, if long-term leasing is bad, what are you doing about it? Because I'm seeing, and you can't rely on parliamentary replies to parliamentary questions on this. You hear about long-term leasing locally, and then it doesn't appear on a list anywhere in terms of, and you know what's happened, and it doesn't appear on a list then in terms of what is negotiated or what's concluded. There is a terrible lack of transparency in relation to what's happening, and it's being pushed heavily, obviously, by the housing agency, where there's a brochure on their website. And if you look at how Ireland is being marketed, they're talking about, rental returns. We're being picked over here, Taoiseach.
Thank you.
We're being picked over here. What are you going to do about the long-term leasing? It's going to be such a benefit to that sector that it is going to mean that we're going to live on the never, never.
Taoiseach, to conclude on this matter.
Yeah, as we've made it very, very clear, and obviously there's schemes that were in place. Last evening we saw in Fingal, a scheme went through. That scheme has been in preparation for quite some time. There was opposition to that again, and that's the point. I mean, your party would have opposed it. But no, because we're going to, if we keep on opposing every single housing project that comes before us. But look, we have to get supply up, Deputy. I mean, we do not. If you say this is an emergency, and you say it, everybody and the opposition say it's an emergency. Yet you seem to think we have the luxury to vote everything down at the last minute, at the 11th hour, when the project is before the council, when all of the negotiations between council officials and other parties have been finalised, when there's over 230 odd houses for social, 230 for affordable, in a 1,200 housing scheme. Ideology gets in the way and says we can't support that, we don't want to support that, and there's always an excuse to object something. And we all have our political perspectives, our ideological perspectives.
Time is up now, Taoiseach, thanks.
But for God's sake, we need to get houses built in this country, and we need to get them going. And that's one of the biggest problems we have, is delivery on the ground.
Thank you very much.
Getting shovel-ready projects started.
Now, Deputy